Have you heard about Twirwaneho and Gumino?
Yes, I have.
What do you know about them?
My understanding is that it's a mix of self-defense groups, people who work and act locally to defend their communities, but then also those who have left the Congolese military or have recruited others from the diaspora to do the same thing.
So according to you, how DRC can get the durable solution about this war which is happening in different provinces and everywhere in Congo?
Yeah, again, that's a difficult question, one that my research doesn't quite touch on. The Gatumba massacre is something that is really quite foundational for the Banyamulenge community in my view. It's pointed to as an example of how the community is targeted, and it is a way in which then people see the past, right? We often see the past through an event like that.
Hello everyone who is watching BMC Radio and TV everywhere you are, and Happy New Year. My name is Bonfils Gapangwa on the mic, and today I have a guest who is coming from US. I can give him time to introduce himself, and we are going to have a little conversation with him about the research which he's doing about Banyamulenge community.
Thanks, Boniface.
Yes.
My name's Chris Davey. I'm a researcher and teacher at Clark University in Massachusetts in the US. And I have a PhD in peace studies, and I've been doing research on the Banyamulenge community, Banyamulenge soldiers, for a few years now.
Okay. Would I have also my brother here? He can also introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Fashengaba Isaac Chocho. I've graduated recently in international relations.
Yes.
Yeah, from Kenya Methodist University. Yeah.
Thank you. Isaac, we are going to be together, and you are going to help me to ask any question that you can feel in this interview. And my friend, my first question, I need to know why you decided to do the research about Banyamulenge community, and what is your purpose?
It's an important question, and everybody asks me that question, actually. I've first started researching Congo conflict 10 years ago, and I read the UN mapping report, which talks about lots of different histories and about parties involved in the conflict, and there it talks about the role of Banyamulenge and their experience in the different wars and conflicts as soldiers, but then also as targets of violence since the 1990s.
So, have you ever been to Congo before? This is for you to do the research?
Yeah, so I carried out my research field work in Congo, in Eastern Congo, in North-South Kivu, and then also in Kinshasa, meeting with Congolese soldiers, both those who are retired or injured, and then those who are still serving in different ways.
How often do you interact with the Banyamulenge community, whether in the US or the places you have gone with?
Yeah, so my field work was a couple of years ago now, and because of COVID, to try and find ways to engage with people virtually or more local to me. So in the US, where I've been living for the last little while, been working with the Banyamulenge diaspora community, particularly in Arizona and in Texas, and understanding their perspective, particularly working with survivors of the Gatumba massacre.
Okay.
So, what are you doing with the Gatumba massacre survivor?
Okay, allow me to ask this question first, because you say something about Gatumba. After doing your research, who is Banyamulenge according to you? Can you tell us what you know now about Banyamulenge? Yes. Because there is some confusion up today. You can see so many people, or some Congolese who are calling them like foreigners, and the Banyamulenge called themselves that they are Congolese. According to you, what can you say? Who is Banyamulenge according to your research?
Yeah, it is a very controversial topic. And in many ways it shouldn't be, because a person is a person and how they choose to define themselves is their choice.
Yes.
My research has shown me that dating back to the 1960s and 70s, that the groups of Congolese Tutsi started defining themselves as Banyamulenge, but had been living in South Kivu, in the High Plateau region in particular, for generations. And many of the members of the community that I've spoken to, both here in the US and then in Congo, can very clearly tell their ancestry, their generations for which they've lived in South Kivu.
Yes.
Okay, so the issues you came across, can you just tell some of the issues you found that are affecting Banyamulenge in your research you've done?
Yeah, so a lot of my research has been with present or former soldiers and with refugees, who particularly survivors of the Kutumba massacre. And a lot of the things that I found in my research revolve around a sense of belonging, right? So where do the Banyamulenge belong? And many of the people that I've spoken to all say they belong in Congo, that is their home. But then the challenges are feeling at home in Congo, right? And often being labeled as foreigners, which is a big issue. I started my field research in 2017, when the fighting was getting worse in South Kivu. And so as I was talking to people about the past, they're very much seeing it through the present, through what was happening in Congo at the time. And that was around having belonging in the Congo. Banyamulenge are, I believe, recognized as citizens, but not treated as citizens. And so this is one of the big issues that I've seen. The violence and the consequences of warfare have created a big diaspora and refugee community. And so as a result of the wars that have been happening, and what some call low intensity violence with militias and armed groups, has resulted in the frequent targeting of Banyamulenge because of this issue of belonging and nationality.
Have you met any Banyamulenge or any group of Banyamulenge in the US where you come from?
Yes, so as I said, I've met many survivor groups. I was living in the UK when I first started my research, and so had connected with people like Delphin over online, and have been speaking with him for quite a while. And other researchers, Europeans, who've been doing work in Eastern Congo as well.
Do you know the community called the Mahoro Peace Association?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've met people that support and who are involved in the Mahoro Peace Association.
The work which Mahoro Association is doing, do you think it can bring any solution to the Banyamulenge problem?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I think that diasporas have a really important role to play in building peace, in trying to provide refuge to their home communities, which is my understanding is what Mahoro Peace Association does. But I think that the role of diaspora groups, when they're organized into associations like this, is to try and find ways to support and also to build peace, to support dialogue and negotiation, and to do their best to not promote further conflict. And there are lots of examples of other countries throughout the world who've experienced conflict, where the diasporas either work for peace or they work more for conflict. But it's a hard situation to be in when you're separated from family and loved ones in a distant country. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, the government says that the wars happening there, they are tribal wars. Mm-hmm. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think people have used that phrase a bit too much, haven't they, over the history, whether it's American politicians or a Congolese or others saying something's a tribal war, when a lot of people who are on the ground experience it, or other experts or analysts working for NGOs, could tell you about all these other issues that we mentioned before, about access to resources, land, education, employment. These things aren't necessarily tribal. They might be connected to different ethnic identities and different cultural heritages, but it's not about tribal conflict. It's about access to resources and about the past and how people make meaning of the past as well.
Yeah, so let's go into solutions because we are trying to analyze the issue. So what is the solution? What advice can you give to the people living in the Eastern Congo, because it's the most part which has been affected by these unending wars?
Yeah, it's difficult. Myself being a white Anglo researcher, right? I often ask this question when I speak with members of the community, and I have to be careful that I'm not being another white person telling you all what to do, because you don't need that. You've got lots of those out there, right? But based on my experience, my background in peace, conflict studies, is that it's important to find ways to balance and understand long-term solutions and visions for peace and peace building. And it's hard for me to give direct advice to people who are surviving and being driven from their homes, or who are deciding whether or not to pick up arms to defend themselves, because I've never had that experience personally. However, what I know and I understand is that finding and building peace is something that happens across communities, and it happens when people find ways to talk to each other, find ways to create solidarity with each other. And so I suppose my advice is more to people living in the diaspora, Banyamulenge in the diaspora. How can you find ways to speak with Congolese brothers and sisters here in your diaspora countries, whether it be in the US or Kenya or wherever, to build trust, to build dialogue, to help promote that then back home.
And what advice can you give the government, because it's supposed to play the middle ground to these issues? So how do you see, has the government intervened enough in trying to calm this issue, or to just end this issue, according to your research?
Yeah, and a lot of my research is very much focused on the ground level, individual people's experiences, and less so on what the government's been doing, but you have to take that into consideration. But there are lots of people that work on what the DRC government needs to do, what Kinshasa needs to do, and a lot of that revolves around reform in the military. How do you demobilize and reintegrate former fighters? How do you create a more reliable monopoly of force within the FARDC, so they're not relying on Menya or other groups? How do you professionalize the army? And that's a long journey that the DRC has been on, and one that many people have resisted over time.
Have you heard about Twirwaneho and Gumino?
Yes, I have.
What do you know about them?
My understanding is that it's a mix of self-defense groups, people who work and act locally to defend their communities, but then also those who have left the Congolese military or have recruited others from the diaspora to do the same thing.
Sure. It's almost 5 years Banyamulenge was been killed, their houses, village was been destroyed, they steal their cows. For now, most of them are refugees, and the government doesn't interfere, even the African Union. No one doesn't care about Banyamulenge problem. So what can you say about that?
Yeah, that's a really big question and an important issue. There are many doing advocacy work within the diaspora, like Mahoro Peace Association, who are working with members of US Congress and other NGOs. And there are NGOs that have been on the ground for a long time, like International Alert, that have worked with Banyamulenge and Babembe and other groups to try and, at different times build a dialogue and negotiation. And those have sometimes succeeded and sometimes failed, but it's something that needs to be returned to. So I think that the current situation is dire and it is difficult, but the best solutions are the long-term ones.
I think you try to surround in different places in DRC, and your research is not only about Banyamulenge, but it's all over the war which is facing DRC. So according to you, how DRC can get the durable solution about this war which is happening in different provinces and everywhere in Congo?
Yeah, again, that's a difficult question, one that my research doesn't quite touch on. Others have spoken about, again, greater accountability in the government, greater reform in the military again, and trying to have a state that can actually function as a state, whereas right now, it doesn't, particularly in the East.
So what advice can you give to Banyamulenge so that they can see how to end this issue? They can advise how they can tackle this issue, because it's, as you said, it has been 5 years now. That's a long time, and the war is not ending. So what advice can you give the large community of Banyamulenge?
Yeah, again, it's a difficult place for me to be in to give that advice, but I think that, again, the way to peace is to find and build that trust with other communities. And whilst that's difficult to do, whilst there is conflict and violence ongoing, it has been done before, and it happens in many other parts of the world. In places like Northern Ireland, you've had a history of conflict and violence. People with different political affiliations have been able to find ways to live together and ways to share space with each other and ways to just try to get along with each other. It doesn't always work, and there are still people that are willing to resort to violence, but there are paths forward from a long history of conflict and challenges around belonging.
You told me that you did the interview with Gatumba survivors.
Yeah.
After collecting those information, what are you going to do?
Yeah, this is a really important project that I've been working on with some colleagues from Brigham Young University. It is, a really important one because the Gatumba massacre is something that is really quite foundational for the Banyamulenge community in my view. It's pointed to as an example of how the community is targeted, and it is a way in which then people see the past, right? We often see the past through an event like that. And so the work that I'm trying to do is to bring context and meaning to that event, not only just to share people's stories as we're interviewing survivors to make those stories known, but to help a wider global community understand the impact of violence and how it creates refugee communities and how it creates trauma through generations. So we want to bring light to what happened in Gatumba. We want people to understand the history and the context in the wider war that was going on at the time, and to understand about what that then means for reconciliation and peace building.
I think it's not only in Gatumba where Banyamulenge has been massacred, it's in different places. According to what can they do so that they get justice?
Yeah, this is a really important question, and I attended the Gatumba Memorial this last year in 2021 in the US, and that was the big question: how do we get justice? And my response to that is, what kind of justice are we looking for? Are you looking for? Is it retribution, which is kind of a standard justice? Is it purely criminal? Do we want to have those Burundian and other perpetrators, those politicians, prosecuted and put in jail? Or are there other kinds of justice that are part of that search as well, such as restorative justice, right? How can you restore the the dignity and to try and help people live with the trauma that they've experienced. And again, dialogue and having a shared sense of history with other communities is a way of finding a kind of justice that is more restorative, that brings communities back together.
So I think the research you're doing is that it's written. So are you going to release a book, or are you just going to write articles so that people can? And when you release it, so that people interested can just go and find the research, because from what you are hearing, it's passion. So that people can be educated, or people can share it for others to know what's really happening over there in Eastern Congo.
Yeah, so I work on social media, but I have academic journal articles that are published, and I am working on a book which I hope to have out in a couple of years. Sometimes these processes are long and tedious, so the work I'm doing is all going towards a book on the experiences of Banyamulenge soldiers, but then also thinking about the wider community as well.
So meaning you have been able to find the information, the roots of Banyamulenge in your book. Will it be there? Like the originality of the Banyamulenge?
Yeah, so the book will talk about the history of Banyamulenge in the context of Congo and in the wider region historically, but it focuses on the experiences of Banyamulenge soldiers from the early 1990s up to today.
Yes. Okay. I think we can end our interview from here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for everyone who was watching and listening to us. Remember to subscribe if this was your first time to watch our videos. Thank you. On the mic, it was Bonfils Gapangwa. Thank you very much.